The breakdown of pleasure, which this philosophy so accurately describes, is that pleasure, the source of pleasure, is abstinence. It is cultivation of time away from chocolate. I do that. I used to do that ironically, kind of poking fun at one of my friends that did that so often. And he did it because he just thought it was cool. And I started to do it ironically. And man, we got to be careful the patterns we create in our minds, because that thought flow now results in I'll do that just for fun and not even realize that I'm now doing it unironically. Basically doing it like him, yelling, I don't even know the appropriate way to use it. Just, I don't know. I guess I created the mouth muscle memory of doing it. And just like that, it came out. And that is a lesson in its own right. But that's a reflection for another day, because today's reflection, and it starts with the fact that I'm wearing a jacket in May in LA, because I'll tell you something they don't tell you in the tourist brochures. LA, specifically Santa Monica, Venice, with the marine layer, it stays chilly, like 63 degrees in the mornings. 60 degrees. I'm not saying it's not sub-zero, but I am just saying it's cooler than I ever thought. And even 5 years in, I'm continually surprised at how cold it will be at when you wake up at 4:30 and it's 55 degrees outside in the middle of summer, even in June. There's May gray, then there's June gloom. There's like a little rhyming way to make it sound like it's small, but then you have like April's kind of gray, then May gray, then June gloom. I don't know what, there's nothing for July, but it stops being cute when you start realizing almost half the year has a little rhyming way of telling you it's gonna be gray or cold. But it's not a complaint. It just is really a decent segue into today's episode around the source of pleasure. This is something that Swami will talk about often in different lectures, and he'll just ask, what is the source of pleasure? Is it exposure to the thing that gives our senses that fleeting sense of pleasure? Is it exposure to the chocolate ice cream, the dark chocolate square, the pizza, the roller coaster, the movie? Is it that exposure to that sense perception? Or is it the abstinence from that sense perception? In other words, is the source of pleasure in the exposure to that chocolate? Or is it in the abstinence of chocolate? I'll give you a story to help illustrate how it's not what we conventionally think of when we think of the source of pleasure. We conventionally think it is, it's the taste of chocolate on our lips, our tongues. It is certainly through the exposure to the sense pleasure, but an example that helps illustrate maybe that's not the case is, what if you eat one bar of chocolate and then a second? Let's say you love chocolate. I love a good dark chocolate bar. A second one, a third one. Chocolate ice cream, that third scoop, that fourth scoop, that fifth scoop, that sixth scoop, that 11th, that 35th scoop. The 35th scoop. If you're forced to eat 35 scoops of chocolate ice cream. Maybe it's one of those 72-ounce steaks that if you eat the whole thing, you get it for free, that we have in Texas. 72-ounce steak. Is the pleasure of steak, does that come from the exposure to that steak and our taste buds? Well, you could fast forward. And one of our friends, Sean, tries to do this like annually. I don't think he's ever done it. Fast forward to that 55th ounce. It's still the same logistics. It's the exposure of the taste buds to the steak. And yet there's no pleasure in that. There's like a little webcam where you can watch him do it. He sends out the link before he does it. It's so fun to watch. So entertaining. He's pushing himself. So he'll get like 50 ounces in, and he doesn't do it in the whatever the time span is. Like I think it's 90 minutes or something, and he can't do it. He hasn't been able to do it in years. He'll drive. I think he drives like 4 hours to try to go do this at this little steakhouse on the side of the highway that's famous for this. And he gets 50 ounces in. And there is no pleasure in that exposure. You get 30 scoops in, 3 scoops in, 5 scoops in, and the pleasure diminishes with additional exposure. It is the exposure that eventually, too much of it, produces suffering. So it's not just easily conceivable to imagine the scenario in which the exposure is presenting no pleasure to you on that 100th bite of a steak or that 100th bite of ice cream. But it's actively producing suffering. Not only diminishing the pleasure with more and more and more, get to enough exposure, and not only is the pleasure diminished, it is, God, you can see it on my buddy Sean's face. It is tough. So this philosophy will present an alternative to the conventional thinking. The source of pleasure is actually in abstinence. The source of anything might not be the full-fledged, full-flowing river, for example. The source of the Ganges is a trickle. The source of the Mississippi might be a trickle. It's not the full-on raging river, but the source of the river is where it all starts. And the source, according to this philosophy, which I love, it's so brilliant that it breaks down everything. And we've been breaking down the anatomy of agitation or how to become more present lately. The breakdown of pleasure, which this philosophy so concisely and, in my experience, so accurately describes, is that pleasure, the source of pleasure is abstinence. It is cultivation of time away from chocolate. It is the cultivation of the time away from something that presents the conditions for us to find it pleasing when we experience it. In our relationship with, let's continue with chocolate, too much exposure to it leads to suffering. Too much abstinence from it, and then when you experience it, the pleasure just grows and grows and grows. If you go a year without chocolate, it's going to be a pleasurable experience. The source of that pleasure is the year without any exposure. Then you're exposed to it. But it starts with the year. And to articulate that further, if you think it's just in the exposure, then let's go. You have 3 seconds in between the 150th and the 151st bite of that chocolate ice cream. And it's not enough abstinence. And that exposure, it's not a source of pleasure. So we have infinite number of examples where the source is not contained in the exposure. It's contained on the other side, the foundation of pleasure, of abstinence. How is this useful in our lives? Well, it's a recognition that, wow, I actually really love going a while between indulgences. I really love, in fact, indulging too much. It's the capacity to see the end in the beginning. You can easily see like, oh, that's going to ruin all of the fun in that. Going to see movie after movie, sitting on the couch for 8 hours, you start to recognize, after an hour or two, you're like, all right, ready to get up. Something that you love doing. You cultivate, you appreciate the time in between doing that very thing that you might love doing. Recognizing, all right, even if you love your work, that time away from work will make it more pleasurable when you go back into it. Relationships. Oh my God, is this phenomenal for spouses? Spend all your time together, no time away. And it's the equivalent of that 151st bite of chocolate. It's you start to get agitated by each other. You start to find the edges, sharp elbows, start to get a little sometimes passive aggressive to create that space. But if you have a healthy approach to your relationship where you are cultivating that abstinence, that independence from each other, all on your own, then it's so much sweeter when you're around each other. Khalil Gibran talked about relationships in a way that the relationship between husband and wife should be like two pillars of a temple. Too close and the temple will collapse. Too far and the temple will collapse. But just enough distance. And it is the support of the entire temple. That these support depends on there being a healthy amount of distance. It's the same for anything that we enjoy. A healthy amount of distance between the exposure. That abstinence in between the exposure, according to this philosophy. That is the source of pleasure. And that's today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.